We always say in franchising that franchising has a funny way of finding us. And you have a fascinating story growing up in Bulgaria in a small village, which I think kind of leads to your why on why you do what you do. Would you share sort of your beginnings and your parents and and the inspiration there?
Sure, and that's a very personal moment. And I came to the realization of what my why was when I started writing the book. And funnily enough, you learn a lot about yourself when writing your own book.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking about where does this passion comes from? Why am I so passionate about franchise marketing and helping smaller businesses succeed? And I started digging, and this was a memory that I almost blocked out because I was very young. I should have been 6 or 7 the most when my parents, they're both teachers, and back then having a teaching career in Bulgaria was quite difficult. They were barely making ends meet, so they decided to start their own business. My dad is also an engineer, so they started their luxury furniture manufacturing company, and they had this brilliant products, absolutely brilliant kitchens, and tables and chairs, and my dad and mom put their heart into the business. However, what they struggled with was actually the business side of things and marketing their brilliant product. How do you go to market with a product that's so good? And unfortunately, a few years later, they had to shut down the company because it wasn't successful. While they were running 2 jobs and working from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m., I was the one that had to do all the chores, cook, clean, look after my younger sister. So I was trying to contribute and help in a very subconscious, innocent child way. However, them failing and not making it through with the business, I almost forgot about that memory. It was very, very recent thing when I wrote the book that it came back to me. It's almost like the little Danny nowadays tries to help her parents, or because she couldn't help her parents, she helps other businesses, and that's how she, makes up for those times.
Yeah, that's fascinating because your story really resonates with so many people I know that they're watching or listening to this podcast because they've had that own experience, either seeing their parents or the family members running a business, because we know that obviously the percentage of people that fail in business is so high. There's so many reasons why. I mean, look, your parents, as you said, they had a great product, but sometimes it doesn't even matter how great your product is. Of course, if you can't get the word out, then it's kind of irrelevant, right?
That's absolutely right. And if had they had the structure of franchising or someone giving them the business in a box, as we call it, they would have made it. I'm sure that they would have. If they had, the marketing, the sales side and everything structured like franchising does, they would have made it. But unfortunately, they didn't. And that's why they struggled. And I believe this is rooted in my why. This is why I believe in franchising so much, because it's a method and a structure and a way for people to succeed.
Yeah. Well, in your book, Danny, you talk about the 5 F's model. And so why don't we kind of dive into that? Because it's the crux of the book. And I think it's also particularly most important for new franchisors to hear this. So why don't we tackle one at a time here? Having a fantastic reputation. Now, we know that's obvious, but why did you list that one first? What was your thoughts on making that the first F?
So this goes back historically. After I became a franchisee, I had a successful period of 3-4 years running the franchise, and then I decided that I do want to go back to marketing because I'm a marketer, and marketing was always my passion. And I identified, seeing franchisor and franchisee side, I identified this gap in the market. So that's how I created the franchise marketing agency that I run today. And from working for over 14 years in the marketing field and in franchise marketing, I've seen a lot of errors and I've seen a lot of common kind of patterns that franchisors and Z's do. And I think one of the biggest errors or the shortcomings that they do is that they don't pay that much attention to their reputation. They don't understand how important, almost detrimental for their success that can be. And that starts from collecting positive signals and reviews to your business, also to answering negative ones, how to deal with unhappy customers, how to deal with happy customers, how to encourage positive reviews. And even more so lately, we've seen from a very SEO marketing perspective, we see that in Google nowadays, the more positive reviews you have on your Google My Business listing, the better your performance is in terms of SEO and rankings on first page in Google. So even more so, you should be looking after, safeguarding, and actively managing your reputation.
And the reputation goes beyond just from franchisee to the consumer front facing, right? The reputation is really us as the franchisor to the franchisee. And obviously, if we don't have a great reputation, it's going to hinder franchise sales, and it's going to limit expanding our network.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of what I heard from a mentor of mine many years ago, and it just stayed. You are in partnership with everyone who touches the business. And that is franchisees, customers, vendors. So your relationships with any of that players and stakeholders in your network is essential for your success. And it could be bad reputation amongst vendors. It could be bad reputation amongst your franchisees that are going to hinder your franchise sales. It could be clients if you're a franchisee, and that will also have a negative impact on this location, but also the whole network and the whole brand name in general. So that's why I decided to exactly stress on reputation first, because people seem to forget about it.
Yeah.
It's a simple error.
And for most of our audience, I think there are a lot of emerging founders that are part of our audience, and it's important for them to know that the franchise community is very small, despite how many franchisors there are, right? It's about 4,000 of us. So you need to make sure that you keep your reputation intact, because it's going to hurt you even from the standpoint of how you're perceived in franchising, bringing on new employees, bringing on a leadership team. Yeah, word gets around really, really quick on how well you treat people.
That's
and what you stand for.
Absolutely so.
So let's move on to number 2. Franchise network is the second F.
Okay, so yeah, franchise network is the network of franchisees that you surround yourself with. And we've heard this many times, franchising being compared to a marriage or dating, because it's a matchmaking process. And a lot of the franchisors out there are just so focused on selling the franchise. And I think that's in itself is a flawed concept. You should be looking to partner up with someone, not necessarily sell, but they also need to sell themselves to you, because you're entrusting the rights of your brand to them. So it's are they suitable for me? But am I suitable for them as well? So it's a two-way process rather than just selling one directional.
It's true. And it is a balance, because as we start out as a franchisor, we're trying to keep the lights on by selling franchises, but at the same time, we want them to be the right person. And I know many times we've talked about on this podcast with other guests how, those first dozen franchisees really set the culture for what your franchise network is going to look like. And also, who becomes a franchisee early on in your system doesn't really look like the same type of franchisee when you have number 100, right? Those first franchisees are going to be bigger risk takers, whereas somebody that is your 100th franchisee is going to look vastly different. And quite honestly, they never would have been your first franchisee, because they wanted to make sure you had your act together and had systems and processes in place that your first dozen were like, we'll figure it out together, right?
Correct. And the first few franchisees are going to be, it's the chemistry. Is there any chemistry between you? Do they trust you, even though you're a new franchisor and you're just starting out? And what I advise in the book is always have an ideal buyer persona or an ideal franchisee avatar. Even if you're just starting out now, create a few and think about John Doe or Jane Doe or a next third franchisee, ideal franchisee avatar, and list out all the qualities and skill set and background information and demographics and anything you can think of, because you need to know who you're looking for so that you can shortlist the candidates, so that you can set your campaigns and target with your marketing message correctly the people you'd like to attract, and not just shoot in the dark. Because a lot of franchisors think, my franchise is so simple, the concept is so simple that anyone can do it. All right, yes, probably so, but you still need to focus on a particular group.
Right. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.